Here, let's start with the hiring freeze that the president has implemented. How is that affecting the D.C. economy?
Well, it's part of a longer-term trend here. Of course, we saw millennials come in droves after the recession, and part of that being the fact that the D.C. economy is counter-cyclical. So when we have a bad national economy, a lot of workers tend to flock to D.C. as a haven for jobs because of the federal government's share of the workforce here. Now, what we're seeing last week with Trump's lifting of the hiring ban or the freeze on hiring, he's now reinstituted hiring, but only at levels commensurate with his skinny budget that he proposed last month. So what we're seeing is a lower level, at least in the plans for hiring in the federal workforce, which will make D.C. a little bit less attractive for those, obviously, who are coming here for those types of jobs.
We think of D.C. as a one-company town, but you've got a lot of contractors outside the Beltway you'd think would be fueling the economy. Is that providing enough support here to keep the economy going?
Not quite. I mean, that was one thing that actually surprised me as a former government contracts reporter. You would think that those would help sustain a lot of the jobs in the region, especially the big defense contractors. But what economists look at is a lot of these deals, especially when you look at the Trump government trying to push a lot more defense spending, a lot of these deals will benefit jobs maybe in other parts of the country where the actual work is being done. Some of the services will help, but it's not really going to propel the D.C. economy for the long term, which is trying to diversify a little bit more, not only from federal workforce jobs, but also from government contracts jobs.
How big an issue is housing? I recall when I moved up from D.C. to New York about 2 years ago, a lot of people said to me, oh, you're going to pay a lot more in terms of rent when you're in New York. It was actually surprisingly similar in price. D.C. has gotten to be a very expensive city.
Well, it becomes a debate a lot. Even in my circle of friends, we talk about that a lot. But D.C. is certainly a very, very expensive city, and getting more so, both on the home buying side as well as the rental side. So that's something that the D.C. Council has actually really tried to deal with. They're dealing with high levels of homelessness. There's a report from the U.S. Conference on Mayors in December that showed surprisingly high levels of homelessness compared with other cities across the nation. So the D.C. Council is working to spend more on affordable housing initiatives, but they really haven't been able to keep up with the need. This makes it harder for homeless to kind of break into a lower income housing market when all these rental properties and all these home buying opportunities are just so expensive right now.
The city has a ring of suburbs around it. Are they the winners in all of this? Or are we seeing a lot of millennials moving to the suburbs outside of D.C.?
Well, in some parts, you might see millennials kind of flock to the suburbs, especially as they get into kind of a higher age bracket. We've seen a delay in millennials having kids, starting families, and moving out of the cities. But you may see some move to the suburbs. You also see some moves to other cities that just become more popular now. You might see a Denver. Seattle is also popular among housing for younger workers. So we'll have to see. I mean, DC's had a good run with millennials, but again, this has kind of been on the backs of being a haven in the post-recession era, and so the economy is going to have to kind of diversify a little bit more to attract those people again.
Michelle, quickly here, how well has sequestration prepared D.C. For this? It seems like a few years back there was talk of the sort of constriction we're seeing now.
Yeah, it has a little bit. I mean, economists at George Mason University have looked at this especially as sort of a test case when we're looking at what the effects of perhaps Trump's skinny budget would have if it were to be implemented. Of course, it's going through a long political process. But sequestration gave a little bit of a glimpse into how big an impact that might be for the region. The trajectory is that the federal share of the workforce in D.C. has gotten a little bit slimmer, so that's healthy. That it's diversifying a little bit more. But the problem long term is that the jobs that have come in to replace those jobs are more in the lower end services categories, so your retail, restaurant jobs, and those types of jobs just can't, they can't diversify the economy, they can't help boost long-term sustainable growth.